This strange artifact may look like an ordinary rock, but it hides a story no one has ever been able to fully explain. In fact, it might just be a clue to something much larger, something buried deep beneath the surface of history. Across every continent, ancient mysteries continue to baffle scientists, challenge conventional wisdom, and spark wild theories that range from forgotten empires to technology far beyond their time. Some were found in caves, others in deserts. A few lie hidden beneath the ocean floor. And all of them have one thing in common: no one can agree on what they really are or why they exist at all. These aren't your everyday historical curiosities. These are anomalies, puzzles left behind by people who may have known far more than we give them credit for. And it's not just one story. From civilizations that vanished without a trace to unexplained artifacts that modern science still can't decode, what you're about to see might make you question everything you thought you knew about human history. So if you're fascinated by the unknown, by the gaps in our timeline, the secrets in the soil, and the questions no one has answered, then you're in the right place. Hit like, subscribe, and get ready to explore 8 of the most unsolved mysteries that simply cannot be explained. If even one of these ancient puzzles is solved, it could rewrite everything we know about human history or expose truths that challenge our deepest assumptions. These mysteries aren't just strange footnotes in forgotten textbooks. They could be missing chapters in the story of who we are, where we came from, and what we're truly capable of. Every artifact, every symbol, every unexplained structure hints at a world far more advanced or far more complex than we were taught to believe. We're ancient people tapping into knowledge we've only just begun to rediscover. Or have parts of our past been deliberately erased, hidden in plain sight? The stakes aren't just academic, they're existential. Because if one of these mysteries turns out to be real, everything changes. In the cold, isolated expanse of northern Canada lies one of the most enduring mysteries in modern folklore: the disappearance of the Anjikuni people. This is not a story drawn from ancient myth or centuries-old legend. It's a case that surfaced in the 20th century, complete with eyewitness reports, a written account, and official response. And yet, despite these details, the truth remains elusive. Did an entire village truly vanish overnight? And if so, how could it happen without a single trace? The story begins in November 1930, when a Canadian fur trapper named Joe LaBelle arrived at the small Inuit settlement of Anjikuni Lake, located in what is now Nunavut. LaBelle was familiar with the community. He had visited before and expected a warm welcome from the villagers. But when he arrived, something was wrong. The settlement, usually alive with activity, was silent. The huts were there, the dogs were tied up, and supplies were still in place. But the people, every single one of them, were gone. According to LaBelle's later account, there were no signs of struggle or violence. Meals were left uneaten. Clothing, weapons, and even food stores remained undisturbed. LaBelle claimed that some fires were still smoldering, suggesting that the residents had left in a hurry. The most chilling detail, however, came from his discovery of several sled dogs lying dead near the outskirts of the village. They had reportedly died of starvation, which implied that the villagers had not returned for quite some time. LaBelle hurried to the nearest telegraph office and contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. An investigation was launched, and according to later retellings, the RCMP confirmed that the village had indeed been abandoned under unusual circumstances. In one of the more dramatic versions of the story, the Mounties found graves in the local cemetery had been opened and emptied, another strange and unexplained detail. For decades, the Anjikuni mystery was retold through newspapers, books, and later internet forums, growing more elaborate with each retelling. One of the earliest published reports appeared in a 1930 article in the Halifax Herald. Later, in 1959, writer Frank Edwards included the tale in his book Stranger Than Science, helping to cement its place in paranormal lore. According to Edwards' account, the RCMP found no signs of forced departure, no footprints leading away from the village, and no logical explanation for the missing people. However, not all sources support the more dramatic aspects of the story. In the 1980s, a researcher named Dave Clark began investigating the Enjikuni account in detail. Clark noted that many of the supposed facts of the case, including the mass grave robbing and the RCMP's full-scale investigation, could not be confirmed by primary documents. The RCMP themselves issued a statement in later years denying that any such disappearance had been formally investigated. They suggested that the story was likely a combination of folklore and journalistic embellishment. Skeptics have since argued that the tale was either misreported or completely fabricated. They point out that while Joe LaBelle was said to be a well-known trapper, no official records confirm his involvement in any RCMP case. Furthermore, no archaeological or physical evidence has ever been found to verify that an entire village once stood at the site of Enjikuni Lake in the 1930s. Some researchers believe the story may have originated from a miscommunication, or may have been adapted from older Inuit legends and applied to a real location for dramatic effect. Despite these efforts to debunk the case, interest in the Enjikuni mystery continues. Part of the reason may be psychological. The idea that a whole community could vanish, leaving behind no witnesses, no bodies, and no explanation is deeply unsettling. It speaks to our fear of the unknown, of being erased from history without cause or record. Stories like this one tap into a universal curiosity about the limits of what we understand about the world and about each other. Others have offered alternative theories, less rooted in folklore and more in the harsh realities of survival in remote Arctic environments. One possibility is that the community did not vanish in an instant, but gradually left over time due to famine, illness, or migration pressures. In such conditions, families may have abandoned their homes and belongings in search of better conditions elsewhere. The dead dogs, rather than indicating sudden desertion, could suggest that food became so scarce the animals were left behind when survival took priority. But if this were the case, why did the story describe such urgency? Why mention warm fires and abandoned meals? And who would have opened the graves, as some reports claim? The lack of consistency among accounts only deepens the mystery. If it was an exaggerated or fabricated tale, why did it persist for so long in the public imagination? And why was it echoed in multiple publications across decades? At the heart of the Enjikuni story lies the tension between fact and folklore. On one hand, there are clear indicators that the more fantastical elements of the tale, the mass disappearance, the grave robbing, the complete absence of tracks, were likely added after the fact, or were misinterpretations of an already unusual event. On the other hand, something clearly did happen in that region to inspire such a story, whether it was the abrupt departure of a small community or an isolated tragedy misunderstood by those who first encountered it. The landscape of the Canadian North, with its vast empty stretches of tundra and harsh climate, only adds to the sense of isolation and possibility. In such a place, it's not hard to imagine how a sudden disappearance could go unnoticed or unrecorded by the wider world. If the Enjikuni people left, where did they go? And if they didn't leave, what happened to them? Ultimately, the disappearance of the Enjikuni people remains unsolved, not necessarily because it defies logic, but because too many of the details are built on uncertain sources. The historical evidence is thin, the eyewitnesses are gone, and the official records are either missing or were never created in the first place. But the story continues to live on, passed from one generation of mystery seekers to the next, a reminder of how much of our world and our past still exists beyond the edge of the map. Whether the Enjikuni villagers walked away, faded into, the wilderness, or were simply a legend given life by the power of a good story, their tale endures. Not as confirmed history, but as an enduring question. What really happened at Enjikuni Lake? In the spring of 1901, sponge divers exploring the seabed off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon the remains of a Roman-era shipwreck. Among the scattered statues, pottery, and coins was a corroded lump of bronze and wood, so unremarkable at first glance that it was nearly overlooked. But that small, rusted object would eventually become one of the most puzzling archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, a device now known as the Antikythera mechanism. At first, no one understood what they had found. The fragments were heavily oxidized, broken, and encrusted after spending nearly 2 millennia under the sea. But as conservators at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens began cleaning the pieces, they discovered something extraordinary: a system of interlocking gears. With intricate precision, this ancient device appeared to have been designed not for decoration or ritual, but for calculation. Over time, scholars and scientists began to reconstruct the mechanism's purpose. X-ray imaging and high-resolution scans revealed more than 30 bronze gears, some with teeth so fine they rivaled the craftsmanship of 18th-century European clockmakers. Inscribed plates and dials suggested that this was no random machine. It had been carefully engineered to track the movement of celestial bodies. The Antikythera mechanism, it turns out, was an analog computer built sometime between 150 and 100 BCE that could predict solar and lunar eclipses, chart the phases of the moon, and model the irregular orbit of the moon through a complex system of epicyclic gearing. It also included a calendar system, possibly based on the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which lunar phases repeat on the same days of the year. Other dials likely showed the timing of major athletic games, such as the ancient Olympics. What makes the mechanism so remarkable is not just its complexity, but its context. No other object from the ancient world comes close in technological sophistication. The level of precision required to construct its gear trains, especially the differential gear system, would not be seen again until the development of European astronomical clocks over 1,000 years later. Even then, the accuracy and compactness of the Antikythera mechanism remain exceptional. This raises a fundamental question: who built it? And how did they acquire such knowledge? Despite decades of study, scholars still don't know for certain. Some theories point to Archimedes, who lived a century earlier and was known for his mechanical genius. Others suggest it came from the island of Rhodes, a center of learning and astronomical study during the Hellenistic period. Inscriptions on the device are written in Koine Greek, and its letter form suggests it was crafted by Greek-speaking engineers, but no text from antiquity ever describe a mechanism like this in detail. What's even more puzzling is the absence of similar devices in the historical or archaeological record. If Greek engineers had the capability to build such machines, why have none survived? Was the Antikythera mechanism a one-of-a-kind creation? Or was it part of a broader tradition of advanced craftsmanship that was lost to time? Some historians believe that ancient knowledge of complex machinery was lost during the political and cultural upheavals that marked the end of the classical world. Libraries burned, centers of learning were abandoned, and oral traditions faded. Without widespread documentation, even the most advanced technology can vanish in a single generation. The Antikythera mechanism may be a rare survivor of a forgotten era of scientific ingenuity, one that left no written blueprint behind. Others are more cautious. While the mechanism clearly demonstrates incredible mechanical skill, it does not prove that the ancient Greeks possessed widespread advanced technology. Instead, it may represent an isolated achievement, an elite project created by a small group of skilled artisans for educational or ceremonial use. Still, the mystery persists. Efforts to fully decode the mechanism continue, using ever more advanced imaging techniques and digital modeling. A project led by researchers at University College London has recreated a fully functional replica, attempting to reverse engineer the device's construction based on surviving fragments. Yet even with modern tools and software, assembling such a machine remains challenging. Over a century after its discovery, the Antikythera mechanism remains one of archaeology's most fascinating puzzles. It blurs the boundary between what we thought ancient people could do and what they may actually have done. A device that once lay dormant beneath the sea for 2,000 years now sits at the center of an ongoing debate about human progress, lost knowledge, and the fragility of innovation. In the end, the Antikythera mechanism is not just a marvel of ancient engineering, it is a reminder. A reminder that the past is not always primitive, and that history may still hold secrets more advanced than we ever imagined. In 1929, while cataloging artifacts inside the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul, scholars came across a fragment of an old map drawn on gazelle skin. It was signed by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis and dated to the year 1513. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard early 16th century map of the known world. But closer inspection revealed something far more unusual, something that would become the center of one of the most enduring historical anomalies of the modern era. The Piri Reis map is best known for its southernmost section, where, according to some interpretations, it depicts a detailed coastline that resembles the northern edge of Antarctica. What makes this detail so controversial is that Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years after the map was drawn. Even more puzzling, the landmass on the map appears to be free of ice, something that hasn't been the case on the Antarctic coast for thousands of years. Piri Reis himself offers some clues about his sources. In notes written on the map, he claims to have used around 20 different reference maps, including some that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. He also mentions that some of these charts were taken from early Portuguese explorers, and even older maps believed to have been preserved from antiquity. This has led to speculation that the admiral may have had access to knowledge far older than the Kores age of exploration itself, possibly reaching back to ancient, now lost civilizations. For decades, the Piri Reis map has fascinated researchers, historians, and fringe theorists alike. Supporters of the map's Antarctic interpretation argue that it shows Queen Maud Land, a region on the continent's coast that has only been thoroughly mapped in the 20th century and which today lies beneath thick glacial ice. They point to what appear to be mountain ranges, bays, and peninsulas that closely match modern seismic surveys of the region's subglacial geography. In 1960, U.S. Air Force cartographer Captain Arlington Mallory claimed that the map showed such an accurate portrayal of Antarctica's subglacial coastline that it could only have been charted before the last major ice age, suggesting a time frame as early as 4000 BC, or even earlier. This hypothesis implied that someone, possibly an unknown advanced culture, had the capability to map parts of the globe, long before any known civilization developed navigational or cartographic technologies capable of such a feat. However, many experts remain skeptical. Critics argue that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map could just as easily represent the southernmost coast of South America, distorted due to the limitations of early 16th century cartography. Mapmakers of the time frequently exaggerated coastlines or added speculative landmasses, especially in unexplored regions. The lack of a consistent projection system and the merging of various map sources may have led to overlaps or misalignments that gave the illusion of a separate continent. Additionally, the claim that the map shows an ice-free Antarctica is highly contested. Glaciologists note that while parts of the Antarctic coast may have been partially ice-free at certain points during Earth's long climatic history, The entire region has been largely covered in ice for at least 6,000 years. Any knowledge of subglacial features, they argue, would have required either advanced sonar equipment or seismic analysis, both far beyond the reach of ancient or early modern societies. There's also the question of how Piri Reis accessed such detailed information, if it existed. No known ancient text map or tool from the classical or pre-classical world supports the existence of global cartographic knowledge on this scale. While it is true that many ancient texts and artifacts have been lost over time, the absence of corroborating evidence makes it difficult to support the theory of a forgotten seafaring superculture with certainty. Still, the Piri Reis map stands as an anomaly. It reflects a surprising level of geographic awareness for its time. The map accurately portrays the western coast of Africa, parts of Europe, and the eastern coast of South America with a degree of precision unusual for the early 1500s. This alone suggests that Piri Reis had access to high-quality navigational sources, possibly those derived from earlier, now lost charts created during the Age of Discovery or before. Today, the Piri Reis map remains preserved in Istanbul, where it continues to draw attention from historians, archaeologists, and those curious about the limits of our historical understanding. Whether it truly depicts Antarctica or simply reflects the errors and extrapolations of early mapmakers, the map serves as a reminder of the complex relationship between knowledge, preservation, and time. In the end, the mystery of the Piri Reis map lies not just in what it shows, but in what it suggests that history may be more layered and more interconnected than we often assume. Whether the map is evidence of forgotten knowledge or simply a brilliant compilation of early exploratory data, it challenges us to reconsider what we think we know about the past and to remain open to the possibility that some answers still lie just beyond our current horizon. In a quiet library at Yale University, locked behind glass in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, sits one of the most perplexing documents ever uncovered. Known as the Voynich manuscript, it is a 240-page illustrated codex written in an entirely unknown language. The script flows with fluid, rhythmic characters that resemble writing but belong to no known alphabet. The pages are filled with strange botanical illustrations, astronomical charts, and diagrams that defy easy explanation. For over a century, no one has been able to read a single line of it. The manuscript takes its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer who acquired it in 1912 from the Jesuit college at Villa Mondragon, near Rome. Voynich immediately recognized that he had stumbled upon something unusual. The book was filled with hundreds of colorful images, most notably of plants that do not exist in any recognized botanical tradition. The writing, which flows left to right, appeared to be systematic and consistent, suggesting it wasn't random, but no linguist or cryptographer could identify the language or even determine the script's origins. Scientific testing has dated the manuscript's vellum pages to the early 15th century, specifically between 1404 and 1438. That makes it more than 500 years old, far too early for a modern hoax, at least in terms of physical construction. Yet its purpose and authorship remain unknown. The book contains no title page, no author's name, and no clear structure. Instead, it is divided into sections based on illustration themes: botany, astronomy, biology, cosmology, and pharmacology, each as enigmatic as the next. One of the manuscript's most intriguing features is its so-called botanical section. Dozens of pages display plant drawings, many with roots, leaves, and blossoms rendered in fine detail. Yet none of these plants are identifiable. Some appear to be composites of real species. Others are entirely fantastical. There are also nude female figures bathing in green pools, connected by tubes and plumbing-like structures. These suggestive diagrams have led some researchers to theorize that the book deals with medical or alchemical knowledge, possibly related to fertility or healing, but these interpretations remain speculative. Attempts to decode the Voynich manuscript have spanned decades. During World War II, Allied codebreakers working for U.S. military intelligence attempted to crack the cipher, but failed. Later, professional cryptologists, linguists, and even amateur enthusiasts took up the challenge, exploring theories that ranged from complex substitution codes to lost dialects and artificial languages. Some hypothesized that it was written in a constructed language similar to Esperanto, or an encoded form of Latin. In recent years, artificial intelligence and statistical analysis have been brought to bear on the problem. Researchers using machine learning tools have tried to identify patterns in the Voynich text, comparing it to known languages in hopes of identifying a linguistic fingerprint. Some AI models suggest the manuscript could contain elements of Hebrew, Arabic, or Romance languages, but no model has produced a working translation or even a consistent grammar. There have also been claims of breakthroughs, though none widely accepted. In 2019, a British academic announced that he had partially decoded the manuscript, arguing it was written in a phonetic form of Hebrew. However, linguistic experts criticized the methodology and pointed out inconsistencies in translation. Previous claims, including one that linked the manuscript to early Turkish dialects, have similarly failed to withstand academic scrutiny. Given this long history of failed decryption attempts, some scholars have proposed a more radical explanation: that the Voynich manuscript is a hoax. Perhaps, they argue, it was created to impress or deceive a wealthy patron during the Renaissance, when mystical knowledge and secret texts were highly prized. If the text is truly meaningless, an elaborate jumble designed to mimic real writing, it would explain the total lack of linguistic parallels. Yet this theory is not universally accepted. Linguistic analysis of the manuscript's internal structure has revealed patterns consistent with natural languages. Certain words appear with predictable frequency. The distribution of character clusters shows regularity. These statistical features suggest that, even if the Voynich language is artificial, it follows rules. It behaves like a real written system, which makes the hoax theory less convincing to some. Others have suggested the manuscript could be written in a lost or isolated language, a dialect, spoken by a small group that never left a broader written record. Or perhaps it was created by someone working entirely outside the established linguistic traditions of Europe, drawing on oral knowledge systems, regional plant lore, and visual symbolism. What is certain is that the manuscript continues to resist classification. It offers just enough structure to appear decipherable, but always slips just out of reach. Every proposed solution leads to new contradictions, and every hypothesis raises more questions than it answers. Today, the Voynich manuscript remains one of the most analyzed, photographed, and debated documents in the world. Its mystery is as much about what it represents as what it says. It challenges our assumptions about knowledge, language, and the limits of interpretation. Whether it was a personal notebook, a coded herbal guide, a religious text, or a sophisticated 15th century riddle, it stands as a symbol of the unknown. As long as the Voynich manuscript remains unreadable, it will continue to inspire cryptographers, scholars, and storytellers alike as silent text, patiently waiting for someone, somewhere, to unlock its voice. On the morning of February 9, 1855, residents across Devon, a rural county in southwest England, awoke to an unsettling sight. During the night, a heavy snowfall had blanketed the landscape. But what disturbed locals was not the snow, it was what had appeared upon it. Stretching across more than 100 miles of countryside were a series of strange footprints, arranged in a single file, each resembling the cloven hoof of a goat or a donkey. The tracks wound through villages, crossed frozen rivers, and according to many witnesses, even climbed over the rooftops of houses and walls that no ordinary animal or human could have scaled. These mysterious markings soon became known as the Devil's Footprints, Newspapers at the time, including the Exeter Flying Post and the Illustrated London News, published reports of the phenomenon, accompanied by maps and sketches of the tracks. Eyewitnesses described prints about 4 inches long, spaced in a uniform pattern, and often found in seemingly impossible locations, over haystacks, through walled gardens, atop narrow roofs, and even across the thatched tops of cottages. In some instances, they appeared to lead right up to obstacles, vanish, and then reappear on the other side, as if whatever made them had passed through solid matter or simply levitated over it. The uniformity of the prints was one of the most baffling aspects. They formed a straight line, as though made by a biped walking with extreme precision. Yet the shape of each track more closely resembled a cloven hoof than a human foot. The snow had fallen during the night and remained undisturbed. By morning, there were no signs of scuffles, dragging, or changes in gait. Whatever made the prints had moved with eerie consistency and apparent ease across terrain that would have challenged any living creature. The sheer scale of the trail only deepened the mystery. Reports came in from dozens of towns and villages, with the tracks appearing in areas as far apart as Exmouth, Topsham, Dawlish, and even as far inland as Totnes and Crediton. In total, the marks were believed to have covered an area more than 100 miles long and several miles wide. The number of people who claimed to have seen them, combined with the widespread geography, made hoax theories difficult to sustain. Naturally, speculation about the cause was immediate and varied. Some believed the footprints were made by animals, badgers, donkeys, or escaped kangaroos were all proposed as culprits. Yet none of these explanations adequately accounted for the uniform shape, the massive distance, or the way the tracks traversed vertical and otherwise inaccessible surfaces. Others suggested meteorological or geological causes. Perhaps the snow had been altered by hail or melting patterns, but such processes could not produce distinct, repeating, hoof-like impressions. Then there was the more supernatural interpretation. The name Devil's Footprints was not given lightly. In mid-19th century England, particularly in rural areas, folklore and religious belief were deeply embedded in daily life. The idea that the devil had walked the countryside in the night struck a chord. To some, the hoof prints were literal evidence of a demonic presence, either a manifestation of evil or a sign from another realm. The reports of prints leading up to locked doors or church entrances only added to the unsettling nature of the event. Despite the fear, no physical harm was reported, and the tracks eventually faded as the snow melted. But the event left a permanent mark on the collective memory of the region. Over the years, the story of the Devil's Footprints has been retold in books, journals, and paranormal studies. Each retelling brings new interpretations, but the core facts remain: a widespread, well-documented trail of mysterious footprints that defy easy explanation. In the decades since, researchers have attempted to re-examine the evidence with a more scientific lens. Some have suggested that a hopping rodent, or a combination of wind patterns and melting snow, might have created the illusion of hoof-like tracks. Others propose that multiple animals walking in sequence could have produced the appearance of a single trail. However, these theories struggle to explain the scale, precision, and variety of terrain involved. Moreover, no known animal behavior has replicated the conditions witnessed in Devon that night. Skeptics argue that many of the accounts were exaggerated or the result of mass hysteria. After all, rural England in 1855 had limited means of communication, and stories often traveled faster than verification. It's possible that separate, unrelated tracks from various sources were interpreted as part of a single event. Yet the consistency in the reports, combined with their geographic spread, makes this explanation incomplete at best. Today, the Devil's Footprints remain one of England's most enduring unexplained phenomena. They exist in a peculiar space between folklore and forensic curiosity, a historical event grounded in real testimony, yet resistant to scientific conclusion. Whether the result of rare natural conditions, a misunderstood animal trail, or something altogether beyond our current understanding, the tracks in the snow continue to provoke questions nearly 2 centuries later. As with many mysteries rooted in history, the absence of definitive evidence leaves room for interpretation. But the devil's footprints stand as a reminder of how easily the ordinary snowfall on a winter's night can become extraordinary when paired with patterns we cannot explain. In the late 1930s, while excavating a collection of Parthian-era ruins near modern-day Baghdad, archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig made an unusual discovery. Among the pottery shards, tools, and decorative items unearthed at the site, one artifact stood out. It was a small clay jar, roughly 5 inches tall, with a narrow neck sealed with asphalt. Inside the jar was a copper cylinder, and at the center of that cylinder, an iron rod. The materials had corroded over time, but the configuration seemed deliberate. It wasn't a vessel for storage or ritual. It resembled, in almost every functional aspect, an early battery. The artifact soon became known as the Baghdad Battery, and it has been the subject of debate ever since. The original jar was dated to around 200 BCE, during the Parthian period in Mesopotamia, a time when the region was known more for its trade and warfare than for its technological innovation. Yet the internal structure of the jar seemed to mirror the principles of electrochemical cells, a basic battery design that wouldn't appear again in recorded history until the 18th century. The design itself is relatively straightforward by modern standards. A ceramic container holds a rolled copper sheet, capped and sealed at the bottom. Suspended within this copper tube is an iron rod. If an acidic liquid such as vinegar or lemon juice were poured into the jar, the combination of metals and electrolyte could, in theory, produce a small electric charge. This arrangement mirrors what later scientists would call a galvanic cell, but the purpose of such a device in the ancient world remains a mystery. If the Baghdad Battery truly functioned as a source of electricity, it would represent a remarkable leap in technological knowledge, especially given the absence of other electrical technologies in the historical record from that period. Speculation about its use has taken many forms. Some have proposed that it was used for electroplating coating metal objects with a thin layer of another metal, such as gold or silver. This theory is based in part on reports of ancient artifacts with unexpectedly uniform metal coatings, which some suggest could only be achieved through electrical processes. However, there is no direct evidence linking the battery to such practices, and no electroplating equipment has been found in association with the jars. Another possibility is that the Baghdad Battery had a ritual or symbolic function. Electricity, if produced and felt through mild shocks, could have been perceived as a divine or mystical force. It's conceivable that the jar was used in religious ceremonies, where the sensation of an electric current might reinforce the presence of a deity or supernatural power. Yet this idea, too, remains speculative. There are also practical counterarguments. Many archaeologists argue that the jars were simply storage vessels, perhaps for scrolls or sacred texts, and that the copper and iron components served another purpose, such as holding a parchment sealed in a protective case. They point out that a number of similar jars found in the region lacked the internal components necessary to generate a charge, and that the supposed batteries were not part of a larger, integrated system. Scientific experiments, however, have demonstrated that replicas of the Baghdad Battery can indeed generate electricity. In the 1970s, a team led by German museum director Dr. Arne Egebrecht constructed a working model using grape juice as an electrolyte. The device produced a voltage of around 1 volt. While this output is modest by modern standards, it was enough to power small demonstrations, suggesting that, if intentional, the design was functional. Still, even among scientists and historians who acknowledge the battery-like potential of the device, There is disagreement over whether its creators truly understood the principles involved. Was this an accidental discovery, a case of materials configured in a way that just happened to produce electricity? Or was it a product of empirical experimentation by a culture that recorded few scientific texts? Adding to the mystery is the lack of supporting documentation. There are no surviving records from the Parthian or Sasanian periods describing experiments with electricity, and no diagrams or schematics to indicate how or why such a device might have been used. Without written context, interpretation relies heavily on conjecture. Today, the original artifact is housed at the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad, though access has been limited in recent decades due to political instability. Replicas continue to be studied, and the debate over their function remains active in both academic and alternative history circles. Whether the Baghdad battery was an early venture into harnessing electricity, a misunderstood ritual object, or a coincidence of materials, it challenges assumptions about the limits of ancient knowledge. If it was a battery, it would suggest that humanity discovered and then lost one of the most fundamental forces of nature, only to rediscover it 2,000 years later. The Baghdad battery remains one of the most intriguing examples of potential lost technology, not because it proves the existence of advanced ancient science, but because it reminds us how much is still unknown. In archaeology, context is everything. And when that context is missing, even a 5-inch clay pot can spark questions that remain unanswered centuries after it was first buried in the earth. In the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters scanning the floor of the Baltic Sea made an unusual discovery. Operating under the name Ocean X, the crew was searching for sunken cargo from shipwrecks between Sweden and Finland when their sonar equipment captured an image that would go on to ignite a wave of speculation, controversy, and intrigue. Resting nearly 300 feet below the surface was an object unlike anything the team had encountered before, a massive, roughly circular formation measuring nearly 200 feet in diameter, with edges so defined and features so geometric that it did not seem like a natural seafloor formation. What came to be known as the Baltic Sea anomaly immediately drew comparisons to modern technology and popular science fiction. The sonar images showed a domed structure with a staircase-like feature leading up one side, sharp angles, and what appeared to be a runway or drag marks behind it, as if the object had skidded across the ocean floor before coming to rest. To some observers, it bore a striking resemblance to a crashed spaceship, its silhouette not unlike the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. The similarity was purely visual, but it set the tone for how the object would be discussed in the years to follow. Ocean X returned to the site several times over the following months, using submersible cameras and divers to investigate further. Their findings only deepened the mystery. They reported unusual electromagnetic interference when approaching the site, equipment failures, and inexplicable anomalies that made documentation difficult. Divers described the surface of the object as unusually smooth and stone-like, with what looked like unnatural grooves and right angles etched into it. Samples taken from the anomaly were later analyzed and found to contain minerals common to volcanic rock, including limonite and goethite. Geologists who examined the materials offered a more conventional explanation. They suggested the structure was most likely a natural formation, possibly a product of glacial activity from the last ice age. As glaciers advanced and retreated, they would have pushed massive slabs of rock across the seabed, carving and shaping them into unusual forms. Some experts propose that the anomaly could be a type of glacial deposit known as a drumlin, or perhaps an outcrop of fractured basalt that had weathered into its current shape over thousands of years. Despite these geological explanations, the anomaly's unusual appearance continued to attract alternative theories. Some speculated that it could be the remains of a sunken World War II structure, such as an anti-submarine device or a Nazi-built base. Others revived older theories about lost civilizations or ancient advanced technology, suggesting that the object could be a remnant of a prehistoric structure now submerged beneath the sea. Skeptics, however, point to the limitations of sonar imaging and the distortions it can introduce. Sonar data can exaggerate features, especially when interpreted without sufficient resolution or ground truth verification. The so-called runway behind the structure could be a natural trench or ridge, and the object's symmetry, while striking in the scans, appears less precise in photographs and diver footage. Critics also note that Ocean X had a financial interest in promoting the anomaly, as the publicity brought attention to their other underwater salvage ventures. Still, the anomaly continues to attract attention due to its unresolved nature. Unlike many underwater discoveries that are quickly cataloged and explained, the Baltic Sea anomaly exists in a liminal space technically studied, but not conclusively classified. The harsh conditions of the Baltic cold, dark, and sediment-heavy make detailed exploration difficult and expensive. As a result, the site has not been comprehensively mapped using high-definition imaging or extensive underwater excavation, complicating matters. Further are the reports of electrical disturbances near the anomaly. While these could be attributed to equipment malfunction or coincidence, they are consistently mentioned in diver accounts and add to the perception that the object is unusual. Whether these anomalies are physical, magnetic, or psychological remains an open question. More than a decade since its discovery, the Baltic Sea anomaly remains one of the most discussed unexplained features on the ocean floor. While mainstream geology leans toward a natural explanation shaped by glacial movement and erosion, the lack of definitive data has kept the door open to more speculative interpretations. In that uncertainty lies the staying power of the mystery. In the end, the anomaly may turn out to be nothing more than an oddly shaped rock, but its allure lies in its ambiguity. It serves as a case study in how unusual findings, once filtered through technology, imagination, and cultural context, can transcend their origins to become modern myths. Whether geological oddity or remnant of something we've yet to understand, the Baltic Sea anomaly invites us to look deeper into the ocean, into history, and into the persistent human need to explain the unexplained. In the heart of medieval England, in the small Suffolk village of Woolpit, a story emerged in the 12th century that has puzzled historians and folklorists for generations. According to two near-contemporary sources, Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh, a strange event took place during the reign of King Stephen, or possibly Henry II. Two children, brother and sister, were found near the village boundary, seemingly lost, frightened, and unlike anyone the villagers had ever seen. Their clothes were made of unfamiliar fabric, they spoke no known language, and most notably, their skin was tinted an unmistakable shade of green dot. The children were discovered near a wolf pit, one of several deep traps dug to protect livestock from predators, which may have given the village its name. Initially, they would eat nothing offered to them. Eventually, they accepted beans raw at first and over time began to eat other food. As their diet changed, so too did their appearance. The green hue in their skin slowly faded. Tragically, the boy grew ill and died within a few weeks of their discovery. The girl survived and gradually assimilated into village life. She learned English, was baptized, and according to the records, eventually married a man from the nearby county of Norfolk. It was only after she had learned to speak the local language that the girl gave an account of where she and her brother had come from. She claimed they had come from a place called St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world where the sun never shone, and the people lived in perpetual twilight. According to her, the two children had been tending their father's cattle when they heard a loud sound like the ringing of bells and suddenly found themselves in a strange, bright landscape. Disoriented and unable to find their way back, they were eventually found by the villagers of Woolpit. The story raises more questions than it answers. Its earliest written accounts come from respected chroniclers of the time, lending it a certain degree of credibility in terms of historical record. Yet its details are clearly fantastical, or at least highly unusual. Over the centuries, many theories have been proposed to explain the mystery of the green children, ranging from the allegorical to the scientific. One interpretation suggests that the children were Flemish immigrants, possibly orphans of refugees fleeing persecution during a period of unrest in eastern England. The Flemish population in the region had suffered under King Stephen's rule, and a massacre in nearby Bury St. Edmunds may have left many displaced. If the children had been hiding in the nearby Thetford Forest or caves along the Little Ouse River, it could explain the girls' description of a dark, enclosed homeland. Their unusual clothing and foreign language might have been mistaken for something otherworldly. As for the green skin, some researchers have proposed chlorosis, a type of iron deficiency, anemia that can cause a greenish pallor in malnourished children. Another theory leans toward the symbolic. Some believe the story was intended as a moral or religious allegory, perhaps a tale about baptism and conversion. The green children, unrecognizable and uncivilized at first, are saved through nourishment and integration into Christian society. Their transformation may represent spiritual awakening or assimilation. More speculative interpretations explore folkloric and supernatural explanations. Some have suggested the children were fairy beings, lost visitors from the realm of the Fae, emerging from an underground or alternate dimension. The association with twilight lands and the inability to tolerate human food at first echoes themes commonly found in European fairy lore. Others have proposed extraterrestrial origins, drawing from the story's strange geography, mysterious entrance into the world, and the children's otherworldly appearance. Yet, despite the mystery, there are elements that root the story in historical context. The fact that two different chroniclers writing independently recorded similar versions of the event suggests the story was not invented in later centuries. While details may have been exaggerated or misunderstood over time, it's likely that some kernel of truth lies beneath the legend. The green children of Woolpit continue to be studied not just as a curiosity of medieval storytelling, but as a unique intersection of folklore, history, and the limits of human understanding. Whether they were malnourished orphans, symbols in a parable, or truly strangers from an unknown realm, their story endures because it resists easy explanation. In a time when the line between myth and reality was often blurred, the tale of the green children stands out, not because it has an answer, but because it continues to invite questions. Questions about how communities make sense of the unfamiliar, about how stories evolve through centuries, and about how sometimes the most enduring mysteries are those that begin in the quietest corners of the world, with just two frightened children walking out of the woods. High above the Rio Grande, nestled within the rugged cliffs of southwestern Texas, stands a limestone formation streaked with time, wind, and something far more deliberate: paint. Weathered but unmistakable, the images cover the rock wall in reds, blacks, yellows, and whites. Human figures with outstretched arms, animals with stylized horns, geometric patterns, and one particularly commanding figure, the so-called white shaman. This ancient rock art panel, more than 24 feet wide and 13 feet high, is unlike anything found elsewhere in North America. It is not merely decoration. It is message, myth, and memory preserved in mineral. But what it's trying to say, and who exactly it's speaking to, remains a subject of profound debate. The site, known today as the White Shaman Rock Shelter, lies in the lower Pecos Canyonlands, a remote desert region where the harsh landscape once sustained thriving communities of hunter-gatherers more than 4,000 years ago. For centuries, the White Shaman panel remained largely untouched and unstudied, one of many such murals hidden along the cliffs. But in the late 20th century, One woman would begin a decades-long quest to decode its meaning, an effort that would challenge long-standing assumptions about ancient North American cultures and the nature of art, ritual, and belief itself. That woman is Dr. Carolyn Boyd, a former muralist turned anthropologist who has dedicated her life to the study of Lower Pecos rock art. What began as a moment of curiosity standing in front of the White Shaman mural on a field trip in the early 1990s became a singular obsession. Over the next 3 decades, Boyd would document, trace, digitally enhance, and analyze every visible brushstroke on the panel. She believed that what appeared at first to be abstract shapes and strange human figures might in fact represent an encoded language, one deeply rooted in mythology and cosmology. Boyd's central thesis is striking. The White Shaman mural is a visual narrative, a kind of pictographic scripture that encodes the origin story of the Hickle people of northern Mexico, who trace their ancestry to the same cultural traditions. The painting, she argues, is not random. It follows a structured progression, mapping a spiritual journey, one that begins in the world of the living, crosses into the realm of the dead, and culminates in cosmic renewal. At its center is the white shaded figure, arms raised and fringed with radiating lines. This, according to Boyd, represents a shaman in the midst of transformation, acting as a bridge between worlds. Her interpretation draws from years of field research, not just at rock art sites, but also among modern-day indigenous groups such as the Hickle and Nahua. Through interviews, ethnographic comparison, and linguistic analysis, Boyd identified parallels between the figures in the mural and mythic characters described in sacred stories still passed down today. The idea that ancient rock art might not simply reflect the daily lives of prehistoric people, but their inner worlds, their cosmologies, their gods, reframes how we think about North American prehistory. But Boyd's conclusions are far from universally accepted. Critics argue that projecting modern mythologies onto ancient art risks anachronism. How much can we assume about the beliefs of people who left no written records? Is it possible that what looks like narrative may actually be symbolic shorthand for rituals, social structures, or power displays? Others suggest that the figures may not be telling a story at all, but instead represent the ceremonial roles of the painters themselves, perhaps rites of passage, hunting magic, or clan identities. Still others remain skeptical of any single explanation. Rock art, they argue, may be multivalent, simultaneously spiritual, political, and personal. It may have held different meanings for different viewers, even within the same community. And while Boyd's interpretations are detailed and grounded in years of study, the fact remains, no one alive today can say with certainty what the White Shaman mural meant to its original creators. What is indisputable, however, is that the art was purposeful. The figures are layered with care, using mineral pigments and binders that have withstood thousands of years of desert exposure. The placement of the mural within the shelter suggests both visibility and privacy, accessible to those who knew where to look, yet protected from the elements. The repeated motifs, anthropomorphic beings, dotted lines, arches, and serpentine shapes, are not random. They recur throughout the region, from other shelters and panels scattered across the canyonlands, forming a kind of visual vocabulary that hints at a shared cosmology or cultural framework. The White Shaman mural has become a focal point for a larger re-evaluation of the Lower Pecos region, once considered peripheral to major prehistoric civilizations. Today, it is recognized as one of the richest concentrations of ancient rock art in North America. And with that recognition comes new questions. Were these murals the work of individuals or a class of spiritual specialists? Were they meant to be seen by the community or only by initiates? And most provocatively, do they represent a kind of writing, a system of visual knowledge passed down through oral tradition? For Boyd, the answer is yes. The mural is not merely a reflection of ritual, it is ritual itself. It encodes memory, teaches cosmology and serves as a conduit between the physical and spiritual realms. To decipher it is not just to interpret art, but to listen across time to the voices of people who saw the world as alive with gods, spirits, and cycles of rebirth. As new technologies like 3D imaging and pigment analysis allow researchers to examine the murals in greater detail, the debate over their meaning is likely to grow. But in many ways, that uncertainty is part of their power. The White Shaman mural resists reduction. It challenges us to look more deeply, not just at the art, but at the assumptions we bring to it. Is it a spiritual map, a myth in paint, as Boyd believes, a visual ritual, a coded expression of power, or all of the above? The truth may never be fully known. But in the silence of the canyon, the painted figure stands, arms raised, not just as a remnant of the past, but as a messenger, still waiting to be understood. So which of these mysteries left you wondering the most? Was it the inexplicable disappearance of the Anjikuni people, the mind-bending mechanics of the Antikythera device, or the eerie tale of the green children found wandering in medieval England? Maybe it was the sonar image deep beneath the Baltic Sea that refuses to conform to any known natural formation, or the ancient clay jar in Iraq that might have once produced electricity 2,000 years before modern batteries. Each story offers a different kind of mystery, some grounded in archaeology and science, others wrapped in folklore, legend, or unexplained phenomena. What makes these cases truly fascinating isn't just that they remain unsolved, but that they ask us to question the limits of what we accept as possible. The Voynich manuscript, with its unknown language and impossible to decipher symbols, challenges the boundaries of linguistics and cryptography. The Devil's Footprints suggest that even well-documented historical accounts can defy logical explanation. And the Piri race map, drawn centuries before Antarctica's discovery, forces us to reconsider the accuracy of our understanding of ancient navigation and geographic knowledge. While science has offered plausible theories for many of these stories, glacial formations, nutritional disorders, lost records, or coincidental resemblances, there always seems to be a gap left unfilled. That space where fact and speculation meet is where these mysteries live on. They continue to capture our imagination not because we expect a clear answer, but because we're drawn to the questions themselves. How much do we truly know about our past? How much have we lost to time, and how much are we still just beginning to uncover? We'd love to know which mystery stood out to you the most. Was there one that felt more real, more possible, or more unsettling than the others? Share your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation. And if you're the kind of person who finds meaning in the unknown, who believes that the answers might still be out there waiting to be discovered, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's always more to explore: new stories, ancient puzzles, and forgotten truths that continue to echo through time. Because the past isn't finished telling us its secrets. Not even close.